For a few hours in July of 1947, the truth about Roswell was public. This part is not a legend. It is documented. A military base put out an official statement saying it had recovered a flying disc. It hit the wire services, jumped to newsrooms across the country, and made headlines from coast to coast. And before the day was over, it was gone. Pulled back. Corrected. Buried under a story about a weather balloon. This is the account of the men who were in the room when it happened, the ones who watched that message move and then watched it vanish before anyone told them what they had just seen, and what it cost them to spend the rest of their lives pretending it never moved at all. In the retellings, one of them has a name. They call him Earl, a young radio operator near the end of a long shift, thinking about nothing more than going home. I want to be honest with you up front. No record confirms that name, and we'll come back to why that matters, but keep him in mind, because what he did after his lines went quiet is the part that still doesn't add up. Let's start where every version begins, with an ordinary shift that wasn't. The Roswell Army Air Field, summer of 1947. This was the most secretive base in the country, home to the only atomic bomb group in the world. Every signal in, every signal out ran through a small room of men with headsets. They handled the traffic, the confirmations, the relays, the chatter that moved a military base through its day. They were trained to pass along exactly what came through, nothing more, nothing less, and never to ask what it meant. For most of that morning, the work was routine, and then the room began to fill with something the operator had never handled before. The base had recovered something out in the desert, and for one brief window, the decision was made at the top to simply tell the truth about it. A written statement, handed to the press by the base itself. The Army Air Forces, it read, had come into possession of a flying disc, not a weather balloon, not a test, a disc. And through his headset, the operator heard the world react in real time. Because a message like that does not stay in one place. It hit the wire services first. Then the radio picked it up, and within 2 hours it was racing across the country, newsroom to newsroom, printing onto front pages faster than any single phone call could ever catch it. For a few hours, the headline was everywhere. The Army had a flying disc. People read it at their kitchen tables. And here is where the story turns. Because someone high above that little room saw what had gotten loose, and the order came down to kill it. Now, before I go further, one warning. The press release was real. You can still find the headline today. But the men themselves, what they felt, what they said inside that room, has been passed down through decades of retelling. Some of it may be legend. Keep that doubt with you. Hold on to it, because you're going to need it later. Here is what the operator described. The lines went strange. Not dead at first, but controlled. Traffic that had flowed freely all morning slowed, then stopped. New orders came down through channels that didn't normally carry them. And the story he had watched go out to the entire country, the one already loose in the world, was now something he was told had never really happened. He was pulled into the correction, told to help move the second story. A balloon. A mistake. An officer who got excited and spoke too soon. He was told plainly that the strangest thing he would ever witness on those lines was to be treated as if it had never crossed them at all. Ask yourself something. An order like that comes down to your desk. Do you simply pass the correction along and go home? Or do you sit there, headset still warm, and start to wonder why a weather balloon needs this kind of silence? Think about what it asks of a person. You watched the truth move. You heard the whole country receive it. And now you are told to spend the rest of your life helping everyone forget it ever left the base. For a while, the story says, he tried to live with it. Most of them did. They went back to their shifts. They passed ordinary traffic. They watched the balloon story harden into fact in every newspaper in the country. And they said nothing. But a message that already printed is not a whisper you can take back. It already sat on the desks of 100 reporters who read it before the correction ever arrived. You cannot fully unsend a thing like that. And somewhere, the operator knew it. And here is where it stops being one man's story. Because on a base that size, a truth that big is never handled by one set of hands. There are the communication logs themselves, the daily record of what passed through that room, hour by hour. Anyone who has looked closely at that morning notices the same thing. There is a window of traffic in the hours around the announcement that does not reconcile cleanly with the rest. Messages that are referenced but not filed. A gap in a record that was, by regulation, never supposed to have gaps. Not proof of anything on its own, but an absence with a very particular shape. Then there is the officer who put his name to it. The intelligence officer from the base, sure enough of what he had seen to let the statement go out on the record. He had held the recovered material in his own hands, and within hours he was marched in front of cameras, stood beside a torn-up balloon, made to take it all back. Colleagues said he never got over it, that for the rest of his life, quietly, he told anyone who would listen that what he held that day was no balloon, and that he had been ordered to lie to the whole country. And there is the rancher who found it. Out checking his land after a storm, he came across a field scattered with material that did not behave the way material should. Strange to hold, stranger to break. He carried a piece into town to show the sheriff. Within a day, he was no longer a rancher with an odd find. He was a man in military custody, held the better part of a week. When he came out, his story had flipped. Just a balloon, he said now. And for the rest of his life, he told his own family that whatever he had really found, he had been made to understand he should never speak of it again. Now here is the detail that should stop you. These men did not compare notes. The operator, the officer, the rancher, different jobs, different corners of the same event, and no evidence they ever sat in a room together to get their stories straight. And still, the shape of what happened to each of them is the same. Something seen, or sent, or found, and then a quiet, total pressure to turn it into nothing. So let's be honest with each other, because you deserve that, and this channel won't insult you. The personal stories are hard to verify. The operator, in most tellings, is unnamed, or given a name the records don't confirm. That name, Earl, may be nothing more than something a later storyteller added to make him easier to hold on to. What he felt in that room cannot be checked. That is a real problem, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But here is what keeps people awake at night. The message was real. The headline reached the whole country before it was pulled. That part is not up for debate. A military base announced it had recovered a flying disc, and then the full weight of that same military came down in a single afternoon to make the announcement disappear. That doesn't prove what was in the desert. Bureaucracies panic. Officers misspeak. A correction is not automatically a cover-up. But it raises the one question Roswell has never been able to answer. If it was only ever a weather balloon, something that ordinary, then why did the truth have to be released and recalled and buried all inside a single afternoon? And why does the record of that morning have a hole in it exactly where the truth should be? Think about what that afternoon cost. The operator carried the memory of a story he watched reach the world and was told to erase. The officer carried what he really held in his hands. The rancher carried what he really found in his field. And every one of them was pressured, quietly and completely, into shrinking the truth down to something smaller. None of it came back to us whole. Not the wording that crossed his lines. Not the truth the officer said he was ordered to bury. Not whatever the rancher understood in that week of custody that made him go silent for life. And not the missing hour in a logbook that was never allowed to have missing hours. And that is the part I can't put down. We tell Roswell as a story about a crash, but maybe it was never really about the debris. Maybe it was about the message, about how a truth can sit on every front page in the country for one afternoon, and then be unwritten so completely that the men who watched it happen spend the rest of their lives being told it never did. He left no recording, no transcript anyone can produce, barely a name, and maybe not even his real one. Just a headline that lived for a few hours. A correction that came too fast. A gap in a logbook. And a young man at the end of a shift who knew exactly what had crossed his lines that morning before he was ordered to call it something else. He went home that night. He raised a family. And the story goes he never once told them that for a single morning he had sat at the center of the truth as it reached the world and watched it disappear. So sit with the questions the way I have. What was really in that message the base tried to recall? What belongs in the missing hour of that logbook? And who decided it should stay missing? How many other men passed that traffic and were told to forget it? Why does an ordinary weather balloon need an afternoon of the entire military's attention to make it disappear? And what does it mean that the clearest record we have of that morning is a headline that was allowed to live just long enough to be seen and then killed? I don't know what crossed those lines in the summer of 1947, but I know what it means when the record of a morning has a hole in it shaped exactly like the truth. If this stayed with you the way it stays with me, then stay a little longer. Because there was a nurse on that same base who said she photographed what the message was really about, and a mortician who got a phone call he could never explain. Their stories are waiting for you next. I'll see you there.